Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, hosted by the American Public Human Services Association, or APHSA, in partnership with Microsoft. Today's webinar topic is Plan Your Medicaid Modernization Journey. Next slide, please. My name is Alex Claremont, and I'm the Senior Content Writer here at APHSA. I would like to take a minute to share with everyone an overview of APHSA and the work we do for and with our members. APHSA is a membership organization that represents state and local human services agencies from across the country through their top-level leadership. We are a bipartisan organization focused on building common ground. Next slide, please. APHSA aims to deliver for our members through three core channels: influencing modern policies and practices with the goal of strengthening communities, building capacity through our conferences, technical expertise, publications, and technical assistance and training consulting practice, and connecting members with key partners. Next slide, please. Now, speaking of connecting members, I invite each of you to save the date for the 2025 series of APHSA conferences. These include our Economic Mobility and Wellbeing Conference happening in August in Minneapolis. And in September, between the 14th and 17th, we'll be hosting the ISM Convention in Reno, Nevada. During the month of October, we'll be hosting both our NSDTA and PHSA education conferences. Check out our recently relaunched website, aphsa.org, for updates on each of these conferences. Now, before we begin, I'd like to go over some light housekeeping. During the presentation, we request that you put your questions for our presenters in the Q&A panel rather than a typical Zoom chat feature. If possible, panelists should try to answer questions during the presentation, but there should also be time left at the end for questions. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants in the coming days. Next slide, please. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of our panel discussion, Andy Pittman, Director of State and Local Government Health and Human Services Strategy at Microsoft. Andy?
Thank you, Alex, and hi, everyone. We really appreciate you joining today's webinar. Again, the title is going to be Plan Your Medicaid Modernization Journey. So as Alex said, I help lead Microsoft's Health and Human Services strategy in state and local government. And in this role, I have the privilege of working across a lot of different health and human services programs, including but not only Medicaid. And for those of you who are Medicaid focused on today's call, I think it's pretty safe to say that all of you are well aware of CMS's modularity initiative that began now 10 years ago. But today, we're going to focus on the fact that very few states have followed an identical path in their MMIS to MES modernization approaches. What works for one state may not be viable for others. And in my role, I have the opportunity to get to know a lot of Medicaid policy and program leaders, notably including Arizona's healthcare cost containment system, also known as the Medicaid agency in Arizona, their CIO, Anthony Flott. And so today, Anthony is going to chat with me about Arizona's Medicaid modernization journey. I think you're going to find it unique. It's quite different from a lot of other states, and therefore perhaps very valuable to you as you're planning your own Medicaid modernization approach. So with that, Anthony, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for that intro, Andy, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you and interact with the rest of the HHS folks in conjunction with both this conference and some of the other ones. As you mentioned, Arizona we'll say we have some uniqueness in that we still own and maintain our MMIS system, our core Medicaid system. So we built it in-house back in the 80s. We've continued to develop on it up until today. And in addition, we also partnered with Hawaii about 25 years ago. And we also build and maintain their MMIS system. So we have two states that are relying on Arizona staff to develop in this system. And so as we started looking at our strategy, the system, again, I mentioned, was built in the 80s. We really had to take a comprehensive look on, how do we modernize in the best interest of both states to make sure we both have unique populations and unique challenges when it comes to Medicaid and the populations we serve. So how do we really set that up long term? And so, as we drive through this talk today, we'll dig into some of those.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. So you mentioned that the current MMIS was built back in the 80s. Can you fill in a little more detail there, why you went the approach that you did in terms of some degree of independence from the typical vendor process? And let's make sure that everybody understands what's happened over these unbelievably 40 years since, I guess, that original system was created. Then we'll talk a little bit more about the Hawaii aspect of things.
Yeah. Yes, understanding the history is important, how we got here. So when we first started looking at systems back in the 80s, well, let me back up even further. So when we first decided to fully implement Medicaid in Arizona, the decision was made on which strategy we were going to use. Were we going to go the typical fee-for-service route, or were we going to go this new and upcoming MCO route? We decided to go with the MCO, managed care operations standpoint. And so we were,
out of the gate, you did.
Right out of the gate. We were the first state to not only use managed care operations, but as you can imagine, finding a system that did MCO was non-existent, right? All of the systems were fee-for-service only. So at that point, we said, okay, let's hire a company, build it in-house, and then take over the M&O of that. Because, again, we were one of the first states, and I believe it was for several years that we were basically the only state doing, especially at the level. I mean, we've maintained over 70%. I think at this point we're around 85% MCO here. And so we have a very small contingent of fee-for-service population. So that's kind of the history of how, we decided we needed to build it out of need at that time. And then we continued to evolve that in-house throughout the years, and it served us well.
Awesome. So you talked about the Hawaii project. So how did that come to be, and how did you guys work together on that?
Yeah, so Hawaii, so I was not around at that time. So I should say I've been in state government about 8 years now. So definitely was not here at the inception, but I've talked to many people who were. That's the beauty of state government, a lot of tenured long-term people. And so the funny thing is I was told that we had a successful go live, and Hawaii was in need of the system. Hawaii was, if they were not the last state, they were the second to last state to be on the Medicaid program. And they decided they were going to go MCO as well. When they were talking to CMS about their strategy, I guess it was that simple. CMS said, hey, you guys don't change time zones. And Arizona just did this. You should talk to Arizona about it, because it seems like this would work out great. I'm also told the fact that we have nonstop flights between the Arizona and the island helped out quite well too. And so the rest was history. So we talked to Hawaii. We showed them the system we had built. They said, this looks awesome. Would you guys be open to running it for us? And we said yes. 20 years later, almost 25 years later, we are still partnered together and still work as closely as ever.
So I know the answer to this, but I suspect many in the audience don't. But how does that work operationally? Is there a separate instance for Hawaii and one for Arizona? Is it the same code base? What do you
Yep. So operationally, we have, so we're still on a mainframe. And so it's the same code base, and that code base is split between different LPARs. So an LPAR is like a virtual separarization, if you think of a VM in a more modern system. So they have their own environment. We have our own environment. Typically what happens is we do the same base code for each environment. We roll those up through test, and then we make the tweaks as needed for state specific items. So operationally, that's about how it works.
Got it. All right. Well, so let's roll the clock to the CMS mandate for modularization. So please tell the group here what Arizona did and how Hawaii fell in line with that, if they did, in terms of plans and what you've done so far.
Yeah. So I should note, Andy, that since we are kind of like a managed service provider for Hawaii, we have been reusing products for a long time now. So, I mean, I feel like we should toot our horns on that one a little bit. However, as I mentioned, we are on a mainframe. This system was written and developed with Ideal, which is an offshoot of Cobalt. And then the backend is Datacom. Again, it's just different enough from DB2 to be a different product. Both of these products were from CA back in the day, and they have served us well. Now, fast forward almost 50 years, and CA, Ideal, and Datacom are not technologies people use anymore, right? There's no, you're not be able to find developers, especially and especially ones coming out of college or those starting their careers. They don't want to learn to code on Ideal platform. And then Datacom, again, is very similar, right? I mean, it was a great database in its day. And it's missing a lot of those modern features that we'd love to take advantage of now. And finding DBAs who know Datacom is also just as hard to do, right? We're talking, I mean, almost to the point of needle and haystack, especially in terms of the US. Nobody wants to work on these aging systems, or I should say the talent pool for those who want to work on these aging systems is very small. So we started planning out our modernization journey, knowing that we needed to make a change in both the technologies. The technological debt was piling up, and we needed to kind of get a reset on that. And then we needed to also have a strategy that brought along Hawaii and Arizona, right? So that we both were in on this together, knowing that we've partnered on the system for so long. We were both in on the modernization efforts. And also, it was going to land us both in a spot where we could take the directions both states needed to take, right, or wanted to take. So, as we were looking through what was available from a one, we looked at, let's just go out on the street, let's just buy a SaaS solution. Well, as we're looking through SaaS solutions, we quickly found out that some of the managed care operations and the way those were developed didn't quite fit what Arizona and Hawaii were doing, right? That side of the house maybe is not as mature as what we've been building over the last, almost 50 years. So we were going to be giving up a lot of leverage and capability, again, from our own estimation. That's when we decided that we would look into refactoring as an option, because our system is heavily recognized as being very successful. We do very good in our TMSIS reporting. We do very good in our managed care operations. And again, we're doing it for 2 states. So we have a fairly good, proven track record. And so, as we started looking into this, we had the good guts. We had a good core. So why not refactor it and continue to make use of that is kind of where we landed. I'm part of that on that journey now. So we kind of decide, okay, let's refactor this. Let's keep it. Let's just put in a more modern tool base and tool set. That's when the real challenges came in, because it's like, how do you convert Ideal to a modern tool set? Again, it took us a lot of digging, I will say. Again, I've been here going on 9 years, a little over 8 years. From day one, I started looking into this, and I can tell you back then, the solutions were not great. In fact, they were worse than not great. They weren't feasible. Fast forward though, and some of the AI tools out there now are phenomenal, and that's what we're using to get this done. And so we landed on an AI product. We did a few proof of concepts that really impressed us. And we decided, again, both states, to move forward with this effort, to modernize this system that we've developed over the last 50 years, refactor it, get it in a new code set. And then after we do that, we're definitely going to take off on the modernization part of that journey right after we get through doing the refactoring part.
Great. Tell us a little bit more about the time frame for the refactoring. How long have you been underway with it? What's the timeline?
Yes. We've been underway about, it'll be a year in August. So almost a year in. Again, I had mentioned 8 years ago when I looked into this, this was a 5 to 7 year project. Right now, we're slated for between 2 and 3 years. We're just doing some rebaselining just to make sure all of the testing efforts have enough time. But we're in between that 2 to 3 year part, so we're almost a third of the way through.
Got it. Thanks. So the cousin system to MMIS, of course, is eligibility. And let's talk a little bit about that. Your journey in eligibility has been somewhat unique in that you had an external vendor, it was deployed to the cloud, you moved it to your cloud. Can you tell the audience how all that occurred and where you sit today?
Yes. Yeah, part of our strategy is to have our technology in our control. And so what I mean by that is, these SaaS offerings, when you leave the offering, they'll give you in some, and not in all instances, but in some instances, when you leave the offering, all you get is a data export, right? You don't necessarily have all the rules, you don't have all the workflows, you just have data, which, I mean, you absolutely need the data. But as you can imagine, when you have a procurement cycle of between 5 and 7 years, and depending on states, I know that's different. And it takes you almost 2 years to get into a system. And you're really only able to use that system for, a handful of years in the middle, because, by the time you use it for 2 years, you need to start reprocuring because it takes 2 years to get on the next system, right? So that procurement cycle just, I mean, it is not conducive to getting business done or growing on a technology. So we wanted to see how we could kind of circumvent that. And so we decided to start taking platforms in-house where, we want to have those products and services in our control, in our subscriptions and our tenants. That way, if we want to move technologies, we can pivot easily. If we want to keep the technology and just move maintenance and operation vendors or move maintenance and operations in-house, we can do that. And it was really around that kind of, how do we set up Arizona to be successful long-term? And we just felt that, having control of not only our data, but our systems was key to that kind of long-term journey.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, because I am seeing, and I'm not going to name other states, but I'm seeing other states beginning to make similar moves in that, there's definitely a split of procurements where people want a completely managed solution. But there are these cases, as you just described, where there is a genuine concern about risk of doing that and having the state control things a little bit better by operating these things either on premise or in a state's cloud tenant. That's more or less what happened with you. Can you provide a little more detail about how that transpired, and was it a difficult initiative to make those moves?
Yeah. So I know you brought up the eligibility system, so I'll talk specifically about that one. So our eligibility system was one that we developed in-house. We had a maintenance and operations contract for that eligibility system, but we owned all the IP at the time. And so, I'm going back about 15 years ago. At the time, the cloud technology was not in a place where we were utilizing that to run systems. And so the vendor hosted all of these systems and data on their own data center and at one of their locations. When that contract came up for bid, we said, heck, I mean, we want this system. We don't own the hardware. We own all the IP, but we don't own the hardware. How are we going to get that system to a location? Because we don't want to buy 7 racks of servers for this either, right? We don't want to own this. And so that's really where we started looking at the cloud as a way to be able to seamlessly house the technology and the infrastructure we needed, but without that big capital expenditure up front, right? Because if we were going to have to buy 7 racks of equipment. Not to mention all of the onboarding of that. You can just imagine the cost just to do that, the cost just ballooned, right? I mean, it's expensive to do that initial procurement on equipment and services. This is where we said, okay, we've really got to move this to the cloud before that maintenance and operation contract comes up. That way, we own it. We don't have to worry about who we bringing in and out. And here's the other part is it's very easy when you are in a cloud service to both permission a new person to come in, and now they adopt all your security principles and governance principles. You don't have to worry about it the other way around where you need to audit them. It's in your environment. And so you can kind of, bring in contractors or contracts or your own staff as needed to run and really maintain those systems, all without having to worry about where are they physically located, how am I going to secure that hardware if something happens, and all those what ifs around the infrastructure, I'll say, of the past. So that was our kind of first system that we brought in-house. Under that subscription model, we've since done, I would say, 3 more in that same kind of model. Being that we build a specific subscription just for those services, we permission it so that the vendor who we've hired to do that work can get in and do that work, but we are the topmost owners. We retain all the governance, the compliance, and we retain the ownership of all that work. Should whatever happen, with contracts and all that play out in the future.
So those all are great aspirations and they sound great in theory, but I think Arizona is unique in that you have actually executed changes of some of those vendors that are doing the care and feeding of some of these things over the course of time. Maybe other states have done that. I'm not sure. So I certainly wouldn't want to make a claim, but as far as I know, Arizona is one of, if not the only, that's really had to make those changes. And so did it work the way it sounds in theory? Were you able to shift? I'm sure there were issues, but were you able to make the shifts?
Yeah, yes. So, again, I'll go back to our eligibility system. That one was done in 2020. I believe it was 2020 was the turnover on that one. So we had it in the cloud in 2019. Had it in our subscription. We went out, the M&O RFP went out. It was awarded to a different vendor than the incumbent. We successfully transferred that over to the new vendor with no downtime and no interruptions to the eligibility system, which anybody who's on from the HHS space can tell you, you do not want your eligibility system to go down. And so that was a high stress turnover, and it went very successful.
That's great. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people on this call end up reaching out to you about that, because I definitely am hearing others talk about a desire, at least, to be in a position like you are and being able to execute the way you actually did. So congrats on that. So after this eligibility system work, you did begin looking at some of the modularization requirements. And I think that you've done some work with respect to the integration platform. Is that right? And can you talk about your plans there and what's going on?
Yes, absolutely. So, when we're starting to look at putting our data to use and maximizing that data between all of our systems, integration is key. And so the first system we stood up in our modernization effort, even before we started the mainframe refactor, was our system integration. And the reason for that is we needed all of our modules to be sending data to one platform. As you can imagine, our mainframe today essentially was our SI, right? Everything went in and out of the mainframe. And when you're talking about changing something that big, it affects all of those connections. As we're changing modules, we don't want to have to worry about, contacting Social Security, contacting CMS, contacting the dozens and dozens of connection partners we have. We want all that in one location, that no matter what module we're replacing or updating, the connections, it's from that module to the SI is one connection every time. The SI owns all the connections, right? And so as we move things in and out, or we add new connections, you can see how this has a benefit where I brought up Social Security, for example. In prior times, the Social Security file would go directly to the mainframe. The mainframe is the only system with that data. If I want to get that data out, I got to make another connection to the mainframe, right? With the SI, I have that same connection, but now I can use that Social Security file with approval, mind you. I'm not circumventing that, with any of the systems that need it, though, right? I no longer need 5 connections to Social Security, or need a different connection to the mainframe to get that data. The SI is really housing all those connection points, as well as it's our operational data store. So again, as we're going through this modernization journey, there are times where we need data to be presented in another system. Maybe it's for an eligibility or an enrollment reason, where you may want data from both the eligibility system and the mainframe to be displayed on the same screen. By having all of that come into the SI, having that ODS populated with all of our modules data, we can easily move and use that information as needed. And it's really that central connection point. It's also what is allowing us to start peeling back the onion on the mainframe to figure out what are all those connections that we set up 20 years ago, and we may have never touched it since. And now we need to figure out what those are. And as we peel it back and move it, it's now moved to the SI. And when we refactor that mainframe, we don't have to worry, or when I should say, when the refactored mainframe, if you will, goes live, we won't have to worry about, oh my goodness, did we make all of these dozens of connections again? They've already been housed on that SI platform. And so then it's just piping the data through with the correct APIs.
And what's the timeline for that SI platform initiative?
Yeah, so there's a couple items on that. So our SI, and I will say our base SI, because we are continuing to add to it. So this would include our default APIs, our MFT, Managed File Transfer System, our ODS. That actually went live, and we had that in place in 14 months. So it's been live for, I'd say, better part of 9, almost going on a year now. One of the things I like to tout on this too is we made use of the NASPO contract. So from procurement to implementation was a total of 15 months.
Wow.
And we had all those services stood up and in use in 15 months. Now, we are continuing to add to the API list. We are continuing to add to the MFT list. But those base services and all of the base connections, the mainframe needs have all been up and running for several months now.
I think most people would assume that you're not doing this systems integration platform in the cloud, and it's pretty obvious from the way you described the systems integration platform interacting with the mainframe. But how does the cloud play into this? Is that a cloud-based solution, or is it done in some hybrid approach?
It is a cloud-based solution. So we took a look at all of our options. We chose to use some of the Microsoft, we'll say, cloud-based solutions, right? Like APIM, like we're using Data Warehouse and Fabric for some of the ODS offerings, et cetera. The MFT system is not a Microsoft product, but it is in a VM in our same tenant or subscription. And so all of that is in the cloud. The mainframe is not in the cloud at this point. When it's refactored, it will be. But right now we have essentially a direct connect from our cloud environment back down to the mainframe, so we can have that, as close to real-time connection speed as possible to move that data back and forth. Once we're fully in the cloud, we'll be able to, get rid of some of those options, some of those items, but that's how we have it set up today.
Got it. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are sort of at two ends of the spectrum, complete opposite ends. One is like, let's get down into the weeds for a second in terms of basic block and tackling, and then the other is the topic that's on everybody's mind today, AI. But so let's start with that other end first. When you look at things like identity management in your MMIS or the Medicaid enterprise system, and more broadly, effectively sharing data across those subsystems, are there any best practices or realizations that you've come to in terms of handling those kinds of things that seem perhaps not that exciting, but are integral to making this kind of thing successful?
Oh yeah. Well, we'll start with the not exciting side. Governance and policy are key, right? You've got to get those items solidified so that the staff know what is expected of them when they're using the AI. They know how to use the AI, and they know which AI tools to use. I'm sure everybody on this call is aware of probably at least a dozen different AI tools you can use. And when you're starting to put protected information in those tools, I mean, it could become a nightmare to the IT orgs out there, right? And not just the IT orgs, but the compliance and the legal sides of the house, right? Wait, what data did you put where, and what are the agreements that the user agreements that you accepted when you did that? On and on. So I would say getting the governance and compliance blocking and tackling done as soon as possible is key, is one of the first things I would start on. It's not sexy, but I feel it is required. Moving on from there, on the IT side of the house, you gotta get your data in a central spot, right? Because the more data that you can add to AI and allow it to look through, we'll say, or utilize, the better results it's going to provide. And so it's, that was one of our strategies, is thinking through, okay, the ODS and how are we going to get this done? We are not utilizing AI on top of that right now, but our thought when we were building this was, at some point we will want to. And so we knew that we needed to have the building blocks in the correct order. And then last but not least, for this conversation, I'll say last, we can definitely get more in the weeds, but is having an AI platform that you own how it uses your data. So again, some of you, when you go use a tool out on the web, I'm not going to name any because I don't want to disparage anybody, but you don't own what they do with that data in most instances, right? And that was very specific to us, that we needed to own what they did with that data. And it was, to be even more pointed, we needed to control how it learned from that data, where those learning processes happened. And so that's why we've been looking at tools that will remain within our domain, that may learn off of our data, but that learning does not go past our subscription or tenant. It does not get out of our control. And we need to make sure we have the compliance, and there's a different type of compliance and governance around that tool, though, to also verify that that's not happening, right? Okay, we can see this tool, we know where it's at, we know the data it's learning from, it can only answer questions from this data set, and we have put in the correct controls to know that it's not sending any of that data outside of our tenants for learning purposes of for whatever reason.
So I noticed that somebody asked a question, I guess out of privacy interests. I won't name the person's name, but I'll ask the question. What AI tools does the state use? Could you expand on that? I know that you said you didn't want to name names, but the question came up, so I'll
Sure.
And by the way, to the audience, if you want to ask other questions, feel free to do so, and we'll do our best to answer them. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yep. So building off of what I just spoken about around the governance and compliance of these tools, we do make use of Copilot today. We also have 3 of our own custom AI solutions. Well, let me rephrase that. We are using 3 custom AI solutions. One of them is our own. 2 of the other ones are, and I mean, this is what's really helped us on our refactor journey, are specific to the refactor platform or refactor project, in that we are using a AI tool to refactor the code from ideal to .NET, which is just amazing when you start to think about it. Another one we're using to build baselines and test cases, user test cases, to verify that refactored code has been completed. And so this is what's really allowing us to speed up the time frame for which this refactoring is happening. On the internal side, again, I mentioned we're using Copilot. Copilot is kind of, I will call it the general AI. That's what we use for, your kind of virtual assistant tasks. And then we have an AI chatbot that we're utilizing. And so we're looking to build on those use cases as we're doing more of those public-facing interactions and allowing AI to respond in a controlled manner to natural language questions, right, and provide feedback where appropriate.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this question in advance, so apologize if it's a little bit too probing here. But have you thought about anything in terms of AI with respect to improving the eligibility determination process, or is that just too far forward for the moment?
Yeah, this is where some of these items get into both state and federal policy, and so I have absolutely thought about it. I think we're still a little while out before we have the correct policies and rules in place for us to be able to use that.
Got it. Okay, switching gears a little bit. A lot of states are citing procurement restraints as a barrier to innovation. How have you guys navigated that procurement differently to support internal development? I think you spoke a little bit about NASPA, but just more generally, is this impeding you from doing things, or if it's not, how are you working around?
Yeah, this is a great one, and it's interesting. I was recently at a conference with the Medicaid directors, and this was a topic that came up as well. We have been leaning more towards building in-house and owning what's being built. I can say that we are, in talking to some of the peers, we are differently positioned in that we do have a large IT team and IT staff that could absorb some of these items if we needed to. We absolutely do still do M&O contracts, as a great one I just mentioned was the eligibility system, where we still own the eligibility system, but we are outsourcing the maintenance and operations to another vendor. I think that this is me personally. I will say the days of big bang, $100 million systems are kind of on the outs, and it's really going to be targeted contracts is kind of what we're looking for, right? I need you to build this, and and have it done in this time, right? And then after that one, we'll do another one, right? So instead of these 7-year, lengthy contracts, it's really more of a targeted, come in and do this amount of work, and then we'll reassess and we'll put out another, and another. And so maybe instead of again, this big 7-year, $100 million contract, it is several 1 to 2 year contracts, right? Maybe worth $1 million or $2 million a piece. And I think that's kind of the strategy where, again, you combine that with a change in development mindset, right? So getting out of this waterfall mindset, which was more conducive to this 7-year contract, right? Because it was, I need to do all of this work to build this big bang system that I'm going to deliver. And now we're going to a more agile mindset where it's, no, I just need these specific tweaks to be done on our core system, or I just need this to be updated, which is much more targeted. I feel like it's easier to contract for. I feel like it's easier on both sides, on both the state side and the vendor side, when you know exactly what you're asking for and they know exactly what's expected of them. Again, these big overall huge contracts where you're doing a ton of fact finding to really build out the product. And I can attest for this in my own org. What you think you're doing may not be what's actually being done, and so you get a system that is built on what's actually being done, not what you want. and so I think, again, being more targeted and taking smaller bites, if you will, is kind of the direction a lot of states are leaning towards now.
Yeah, clearly that has the potential to reduce risk in a significant way and much less surprises, as you indicated. And to your point, I'm seeing other states say similar things now. And I think, it's driven by a lot of factors, including just overall complexities and challenges with those large projects, but also the new realities of less funding being available for these things. To that end, I'm curious, Arizona specific, is most of that mission to do things in more compartmentalized, manageable chunks driven by your department, or is it also affected by the state legislature and maybe them putting pressure on you to not spend as much money?
Well, everybody in state government knows that pressure is always there. So
Yeah.
I will definitely say that is our middle name is cost containment. So at Access here, and so we are always looking for ways to contain the cost, to reduce cost, but also we don't want to do that at the sacrifice of the services we provide. And so we want to make sure that we are providing secure, reliable systems for the crucial services that we're providing to our population, to our members. But we want to try to do that with the lowest cost we can, right? And we're trying to make the best decisions while taking both of those things into consideration.
Got it. So you've talked quite a bit about the fact that Arizona does a lot of this work independently on both the state's behalf as well as Hawaii. What sort of talent does it take? I mean, obviously you talked about things like people with certain legacy platform skills, but more generally, I mean, especially as you're going through this refactoring and the modernization approach, how are you securing talent? And are you able to do so at reasonable cost? And are you able to retain these people? And very, I would say, timely, the fact that it's become, I think, a little more challenging just in the last year, maybe even more so in the last 6 months in terms of technology employment, has that affected things? So if you can start from how you're attracting people and then what the latest sort of developments in the employment market are doing to affect your ability to get people.
Let me highlight a couple of those items. So we do our best with salary, but anybody who, we'll say most people who work for the state know that we are not going to be competing with some of the big private sector folks, right? And so again, we try to be as competitive as we can, but that's going to be a losing battle at some point. So what we really highlight and drive on ourselves is our innovation and our culture. We've been recognized as one of the best agencies to work for several years by many leading publications. We have a great culture here. We are routinely recognized for some of our kind of innovation in the Medicaid space. Again, being first to MCO, one of our recent waivers around paying for housing using Medicaid dollars, because we can give you all the treatment possible, but if you don't have a reliable place to live, how far does that go, right? And so I think when you start speaking to the mission, the services we provide, the culture, and the innovation, and then now you start pairing that with some of the awesome things we're doing on our modernization in our roadmap that we have out there. And there's a lot of people who want to be part of that, right? They want to see us using some of these newer technologies to meet the mission. They want to help out the members in their own community, the people in their own community. And then they want to work for a place that has a great culture, and so you kind of pair those things together, and that's really the driving effort behind bringing in new talent, attracting new talent.
I would think some of the AI initiatives that you spoke about will probably help attract.
So I mentioned some of the innovation on the programmatic side. I think we're absolutely innovating on the IT side too. So if you let me geek out for a second, I love I love the AI tools we're using. What we're doing, I'll just speak within the state of Arizona, is very unique, and we got a lot of eyes watching us there, just within our own state on utilizing AI in a manner that is kind of, I want to say, outside of the norm, right? So we're using it to refactor one of our core systems. We're using it to build test cases for that refactor project. And so these are use cases that sometimes when people hear AI, they're not thinking of, but they have a huge impact. And I mean, the amount of time it is going to save us, we're talking about potentially 4 to 5 years. These tools can save us on our overall project timeline, which is huge. When you go from a 2 to 3 year project as opposed to a 7 to 8 year project, I mean, anybody will tell you, I mean, that's, one, you're probably not even going to start. The other one is at least tenable. And so those items alone are amazing. I'll also pull out a couple more operational ones. We're using AI in our cybersecurity space. We're using Copilot in our cybersecurity place with in the Microsoft platform, which has been amazing. It has allowed our teams to be able to dig in on things that they might not have had time to get to before. Again, phenomenal use case. We're also using it on some of our development side and infrastructure side, where the group of developers that we've given Copilot AI I think it's called DevOps Copilot. Look, Andy, we got to talk about how many Copilots we have. But anyways, that's just but they're producing 60% more lines of code than their peers, which is phenomenal in the same amount of time, right? And so those are just a couple of use cases where it's like, utilizing these AI tools on the internal side, on some of the we'll call them, run the lights type of side of the house, has been hugely beneficial. And that's before we're even getting to the customer facing or member facing side of the house, where we think we're going to get, the same kind of benefits.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen at least 2 other states follow a similar pattern to you, in which the focus is using AI for efficiency in terms of the way you're creating things. And, that's absolutely a sensible thing to do while we wait for CMS and others to advise in terms of what's acceptable use practices and that kind of thing. So I commend you for that. That's a smart move. And if you answered this and I missed it, I'm sincerely apologetic, but have you noticed any differences lately, like say literally over the last 6 months or maybe a bit more, in terms of filling job roles, because there are so many people seemingly seeking technology roles today versus what we saw 2 years ago?
Yeah, thanks for that. So for our older technology jobs, we are having the same problems we've always had, right? So when we put out something for ideal programmers, I'm still struggling. Yeah. For our newer technology jobs, I will say we're actually on the uptick for applicants. So and when I say newer technology, .NET programmers, SQL, Fabric DBAs, infrastructure, even desktop. We've seen a nice uptick in the applications on that side of the house, and I think largely it's due to the amount of technology we're putting in front of those teams, including some of the AI stuff, so that they can use to get their job done. And so I do think there's been a benefit in kind of moving that direction.
Great. Okay, we're going to begin winding down here. I'm going to ask Anthony another question, but if anybody in the audience wants to ask any additional questions beyond those that you've teed up, please do so in the next minute or two. So Anthony, what's next for you guys? I mean, what's going to happen over the course of the next 1 to 2 years? And if you have any messages for your fellow state or Commonwealth Medicaid leaders, what would those be?
Oh yeah, automate. I'm a huge proponent. I always ask my team. I'm like, when I see something once, okay, if I see it twice, I'm always like, all right. The third time, I'm like, we better not see it again, right? We should be automating whatever it is that's popping up. If something it continues to come up and keeps getting brought up as a pain point, or something keeps, a particular process that needs to keep being done manually, automating, and that can be with both AI, it can be with machine learning, it can be with workflows, but I think continuing to automate some of those mundane processes, so that all that's left is the really big stuff. And that's going to be a huge ask, right? I'm not going to get through all of those in the next 1 to 2 years. But I think making those minor improvements to move the business towards a path of needing less man hours, right? I've mentioned this before on we've talked about the IT side of the house. On the programmatic side of the house, a lot of these people did not come to work for the Medicaid agency to fill out 4 hours of paperwork and move stuff from one pile to another. They came here to make a difference, and they interact with the members. And yeah, in some instances, we have them so bogged down in checking hundreds of emails and doing, printouts still, right? As opposed to just saving things digitally, I want to automate some of that mundane work they have to do, so they are back to spending the majority of their days doing what they came to do. And we have a lot of work to do in that area, but that's the goal. And I know you said over the next year to two. So I don't know that I'll be done in the next year to two, but that's what I'm shooting for.
Well, those are great aspirations. And I mean, I know that even internally here at Microsoft, I mean, we are encouraged to figure out ways to use AI every single day to improve processes. And, sometimes it takes a little bit of push to get people to want to do that, including myself. But once you do it, you come to realize, wow, I can't live without this. And candidly, the people who may be trying to do the same things as you are probably using it. And if you're not, you're going to fall behind. So I think you're absolutely correct on that. Okay, to the moderators behind the scenes, I do not see any additional questions, but I want to make sure I'm looking in the right place here. I do not. So Anthony, any other closing thoughts as we wrap things up here?
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of I'll leave everybody with a quick story. So I know when we first got Copilot AI, we had basically told everybody you can't use some of the personal services. This has got to be an agency purchase service. That way we have the governance and compliance over it. We first got Copilot AI. That was our first one we chose. We gave it to 100 people, and I'd say after about 2 months, 10 people had used it. Right. And so, I really went back and I'm like, why is nobody else? Why are you guys not using this? Why are you not, trying? And they said, well, I don't know what to do with it. And so I kind of leave everyone that story, because it's one of those things. Like, sometimes you gotta help them push the rock, get it going, so that once it starts going downhill, it's sky's the limit. So, coming back to the story, I started giving them use cases. I go, remember that policy that was sent over? Ask us AI to summarize that. I said, try getting it to write your next email. I just was throwing out suggestions. Over the next month, we had 80 people using it.
Wow.
And so, again, it was just that first push, though, because they couldn't, just giving them a tool, and they're like, yeah, I already got tools. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I don't know how to use it. But you start giving them a few use cases, and not only do they start using it, but then they start thinking of other ways to use it. And so I will encourage everybody, one, just get started, right? Just get started, because these tools are immensely beneficial. I mean, and even some of them, like within 5 to 10 minutes of using it. And two, continue to have that organizational change management conversation, right, around why we're pushing for these new technologies. And it's not just because, it's new and shiny, but it's because it can make a difference and it can save time. But we've got to start using these items in order to, start finding those use cases. So,
well, congrats on raising that usage rate so dramatically, so quickly. That's amazing. And it's similar to what I've seen. You just have to push people. People, just are in their comfort zone. And once you teach them something new, then they realize, and it's off to the races at that point. So that's a great message for everyone. And Anthony, I want to thank you for spending this hour sharing the Arizona Medicaid modernization story. And if people wanted to contact you, how would they do that? I don't know if you're comfortable sharing an email address or if there's a different mechanism through LinkedIn or something, but I suspect there may be some people who have questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't mind sharing my email address. I don't know if there's an easy way to type it.
Well, what we can do is we can, when the recording is sent out next week, my understanding is that APHSA can add those kinds of things. So we'll just
That'd be perfect. Yep. And I will mention I'm also on LinkedIn. If you're more comfortable there, by all means, feel free to reach out and love to have a chat there as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Anthony. And thank you to the audience and thank you to the APHSA team for enabling this. And we look forward to those who are attending the upcoming conferences, especially ISM, hopefully meeting you there. So thank you.